Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the order of the Independent School District 13, Columbia Heights Public Schools School Board meeting of Tuesday, December 10th, 2013. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you call the roll, please, Laura?
Ms. Meyer?
Here.
Mr. Landwehr?
Here.
Mr. Larkin?
Here.
Mr. Bardell?
Here.
Ms. Lee?
Here.
Ms. Palmer? Here.
Thank you. Columbia Heights Public Schools creates worlds of opportunity for every learner in partnership with supportive small-town communities by challenging all to discover their talents, unleash their potential, and develop tools for lifelong success. On this evening's agenda, we have Heights Lights. The board will honor Joy Bayless, the 2013 Minnesota Elementary Level Co-Art Educator of the Year, and Superintendent Kelly, 2013 Minnesota Supervision and Administration Division Art Educator of the Year. So I think, oh, yeah, I do. So, all right. Columbia Heights Public Schools has 2 more awards to add to its state and nationally recognized arts program. Highlands Elementary School art teacher Joy Bayless is the 2013 Minnesota Elementary Level Co-Art Educator of the Year. Superintendent Kathy Kelly was selected as the 2013 Minnesota Supervision and Administration Division Art Educator of the Year. The awards by the Art Educators of Minnesota, AEM, recognizes outstanding members who have proven to serve students, schools, districts, the state of Minnesota, and AEM in various ways to support quality art education. Joy Bayless was nominated by her principal, Michelle DeWitt. In referring to Bayless, DeWitt said she is fortunate to work with a talented, dedicated, and exemplary art teacher and artist, and that she shows a great commitment to her chosen profession. Among Bayless's accomplishments, DeWitt emphasized are organizing the district's Fine Arts Night, submitting student artwork in regional and statewide contests and exhibitions with multiple awards won, and serving on district and state art committees. Professionalism, strong organizational skills, natural artistic ability, high standards, a caring attitude, and a sense of team are certainly attributes any quality art educator must possess, DeWitt wrote. And as an educator and leader, Ms. Bayless displays all of these. Should I read? Yeah. Kathy Kelly was nominated by Ms. Scully on behalf of the district's arts educators. Our strong K-12 arts education program exists and flourishes because of our superintendent, Scully wrote. Among the many accomplishments they attribute to Superintendent Kelly, a tireless advocate, our willingness to stand up for the arts, valuing arts education is an integral part of the whole education of the student, and encouraging art educators to become local, state, and national leaders. This is not Kelly's first art awards. In 2011, she was named the recipient of the 7th annual VH1 Save the Music Administrator Award for distinguished support of music education. There have only been a handful of AEM members who have received the Supervision and Administration Award in AEM's history since it started in the 1950s. With that, Joy Bayless is recognized for being named the Minnesota Elementary Co-Art Educator of the Year. Joy? Congratulations, Joy. He wants to take the picture. Well done, you bet. And Superintendent Kathy L. Kelly is recognized for being named the Minnesota Supervision and Administration Division Art Educator of the Year. Congratulations. And I believe Ms. Scully has a few words she would like to say.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I would just like to congratulate the two people that received the AEM awards. Very rare is it the award ever given to a supervision or administration person in the history of AEM, and we're about 75 years old, the organization is. Um, Not me, but the organization. And I want to congratulate Joy Belicius, and she took over for me when I left Highland. And in very short order, I realized that I left the Highland kids in excellent hands. And now, years later, getting her kids at the high school, I know that I left them in excellent hands. And so I'd just like to explain also that their paperwork then is forwarded on to the National Art Education Association, and so they can win regional and national awards. And so that is determined in December and notified in January. So if there was a board award, we would have, the art teachers would have nominated the board, but there's no board award. So just know that we appreciate your support over the years, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda is agenda approval adjustments, announcements, correspondence, and our first action is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Laura, second by John. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried. Announcements, December 23rd, January 3rd, no school. January 6th, Monday, school resumes. January 7th, Tuesday, 7 p.m. is the organizational meeting here in the community room. January 14th, Tuesday, 7 p.m. is the regular school board meeting here in the community room. January 20th, Monday, no school for Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. January 21st, Tuesday, 5:30 p.m., school board work session here in the community room. January 24th, Friday, no school, it's a grading day. And January 28th, Tuesday, 7 p.m. is the regular school board meeting here in the community room. Superintendent Kelly, is there any correspondence?
Mr. Chair, members, there is none.
Okay. Next on our agenda is communications to the board. At this time, any citizen or employee may briefly address the school board. The board will listen to brief remarks, ask clarifying questions, and if desired, request that administration follow up. Board, however, will not take action at this meeting on requests presented at this time. Anyone like to come for the board? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which consists of minutes of the November 12th and 26th, 2013 school board meeting, personnel report, and treasurer's report for October 2013. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll move that forward.
Second.
Motion by Missy, second by Laura. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion has carried. Next on our agenda is acknowledgement of contributions. Whereas Minnesota Statute 123B02 permits school boards to receive for the benefit of the district's bequest, donation, or gift for any proper purpose and apply the same to the purpose designated. In that behalf, the board may act as a trustee of any trust created for the benefit of the district and for the benefit of pupils thereof. Therefore, be it resolved by the School Board of Columbia Heights Public Schools Independent School District Number 13 that the school board accepts with appreciation the contributions detailed in the background in the amount of $1,340.70. Monetary, a donation of $43.05 was made to Valley View Elementary by Wells Fargo Foundation for Student Needs. Value in kind, donation of books to Valley View Elementary from the Jacobson family, estimated value of $47.65. Donation of a butcher block table to Blooming Heights Resource Room from Kristen Stunkel and Kent Connell, estimated value $250. Donation of painting, shelving, and supplies to Valley View Elementary from Home Depot, estimated value $1,000. Total fiscal year 2013-2014 monetary contributions to date, $18,765.05. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ted, second by Laura. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, Laura, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Meyer.
Aye.
Mr. Landwehr.
Aye.
Mr. Larkin.
Aye.
Mr. Bardell.
Aye.
Ms. Lee.
Aye.
Ms. Palmer. Aye.
And that resolution passed. Thank you very much. Discussion reports, information items. At this time, members will report on board activities since the last regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Education. And this evening, I'll start with Missy.
All right, I've been doing a couple of things. I met with Kathy Kelly, so thank you for that meeting. It was very interesting and entertaining. So I also I'd gone to the delegate assembly for 2 days with my fellow board members, Director Meyer and Director Landwehr. And I'm going to not go too much into that. I'll let them go into it. But I wanted to touch briefly on, I did have my MSBA State Board meeting this weekend, so I just wanted to go over a couple things that we went over on the agenda. One of them was the Minnesota High School League. They talked about that. Certain members on the board had some concerns, and there are some concerns about scheduling that's coming up for the 2014 year. Also about what was brought up is football eventually going to be banned all over the nation, in which that is not being discussed at a state level as far as I know right now and as far as they know. But there is some talk out there about that, but I don't think that that's going to be happening. They also talked about a lot of the injuries and how they're trying to, as we're going to see more and more, especially in football with concussions and stuff that are going to be coming through. The next thing is I brought forward because in the community I've been talked to several times about school lunches. And I was asked to bring it up to MSBA, and that's what I did. So I did ask them that we as a state board needed to start support for local schools across the state that are having difficulties in their lunch, in the lunchrooms and feeding kids. Much to my surprise, and I got a letter yesterday from the director of MSBA stating that on December 5th, there was some legislation that was presented, and NSBA, National School Boards Association, is supporting it and asking for continued support across the nation against the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010. They're asking for loosening up of the mandates that are coming forward. This was taken forward by a representative out of South Dakota. The bill is H.R. 3663, and like I said, it was introduced on December 5th. I'm composing letters to Congress in support of this bill so that we can move forward and make sure the kids are getting fed the way they need. Now, I did talk to Bill about this briefly prior to this, and I know that they have loosened, you said, on the grains and stuff like that, so kids are getting a little bit more. But I think it's something that I feel was important. It is also something that obviously parents are concerned about in our district, but also obviously across the state, there's many, many schools that are concerned. I've got each of you a copy of the article, and Bill, I have the bill for you to look at. But one of the things is that, and I think it's really important to know that National School Boards Association is really taking a turn to being more supportive and moving forward on legislation on a federal level, supporting school boards across the nation. And this is just one that Mr. Gensel is supporting and asking that everyone go out and speak to their representatives about this, and that these mandates be loosened, because there are so many kids. And you hear the story all the time, and I was told this weekend, we hear the stories, we all know the stories. But you can't speak enough when you know that there are kids that are coming into school, and that is the only meal that they eat. And if they are walking away not being able to eat because we're mandated that we can't give that to them, not only do parents need to know this, but they also need to know that we support them and as a board, and that we're going to move forward and hopefully change some of these mandates. Because it is about kids, and that's what I've always said. If it's not about a kid, when you're on this board, then it's not, to me, it's not as important. So I'm pleased to say that NSBA is supporting it, the state school board is supporting it, and we'll move forward. And if anybody needs information on this bill for school nutrition, by all means, get a hold of me, and I'll be more than happy to share any information that I have on a state level and as I move forward on a national level. Now on some fun notes. The other thing in the district is going on. We've got wrestling. I went to that this last week. Kids are working really hard for that, and we've got swimming going on and basketball going on. So if you get an opportunity, go out and support the kids, and as they're working hard in their athletics. And I think that's about it, other than the delegate assembly, which, like I said, I'll leave to my fellow board members.
All right, thank you. Laura?
I actually don't have anything to report.
Okay, very good. Lori?
Well, I attended the policy committee meeting earlier this evening, and then, like Missy said, I was at the MSBA delegate assembly this past weekend. It really was a great learning experience, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to go. One of the, I guess, highlights for me was the legislative auditor was there giving a presentation and review of their recent findings after they reviewed special education. And so they, I can share, we can get copies of the presentation for everyone if you want to see what the slides were. But they really took a look at special education on all different levels and to see where it's at, the funding, just numbers of students receiving special education, what types and what levels. And then some of the recommendations that they came out with as far as, one of the things that I found very interesting was making the MDA or MDE administrative rules consistent with state statutes. Just seems kind of common sense that that would exist, but apparently there's some gaps. So I won't go into a whole lot of detail. It was a pretty long presentation, but get copies if other people want to see it. And that's pretty much all I have.
All right, thank you. Ted?
Yeah, I was also at the MSBA Delegate Assembly, and I wanted to go in a little bit more detail because we covered so much, and it was a fascinating time. It's always fascinating to talk to other school board members from throughout the state to compare notes and see what's happening in their districts. I think we're doing pretty well, from what I understand. So, but we did talk about we had a presentation Friday night on special education with Jody Hauer from the Minnesota Legislative Auditor's Office. In addition to what Member Meyer said, she also talked about reducing paperwork burden in special ed. And special ed teachers from throughout the state are really calling for that and seeing if we can streamline that, and that would add a lot of time and efficiency to delivering special ed services. We also heard from Rose Hermanson from the Minnesota Department of Education on the Education Task Force on developing programs for educator licensing, career and technical education, and adult basic education, charter schools, and high school improvement. And then we had a panel with those two ladies, and also Kurt Schneiderwin on special education caseloads and teacher licensure, and making the rules on teacher licensure more reasonable and logical, so that teachers who are very good teachers that can't otherwise get a license because they're deficient in an area that's not related to their teaching can get licensed anyway. So we have the best teachers possible. As far as the resolutions, the purpose of the assembly was to determine the resolutions that the lobbyists for MSB are going to put forward in the legislature. We dealt with school finance and being able to use to levy at a board level for things like health or safety dollars, for school security, location equity revenue to help the less affluent districts in the state have equity with the more affluent districts. And then we talked about being able to levy for changes in pension costs and TRA changes, which pension costs are projected to really increase significantly. So it's something that cities and counties can now do that, and school boards can't. So we want to be able to have that ability to do that. And then to eliminate barriers for PSEO credit for earning college credit in high school. There was a resolution on biliteracy that did not pass. There's wasn't a movement to get a state seal of biliteracy. And then to have, the other highlight was to be able to allow school boards to expel students if necessary and not have MDE be able to overturn it, to respect school board authority that way. And publishing notices electronically if the school boards need to, that also was passed. And then applying school trust lands, which is something I didn't know, that school trust lands existed in Minnesota a long time ago. They were established to benefit school districts, and having the revenue from those lands benefit school districts. So that's a flavor of what was discussed. And the other highlight was that there's a projected $1.086 billion surplus in the biennium budget. And they project that the K-12 shifts will be completely repaid, and we'll have $825 million extra to work with. So we'll see if that holds true. I also attended the high school PTO meeting, and they're getting organized and doing fundraising. They want to give a scholarship out at the end of the year to high school students. And also attended a Lions and Chamber meeting, and that was it.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
John?
I also attended the Subcommittee on Policy meeting prior to this one. As far as other activities, there hasn't been anything since our last meeting. I have a couple plugs that are for stuff coming up, but I'll wait till the board topic piece to talk about that.
All right, thanks. I also attended the policy subcommittee meeting. I'm going to spend the majority of my time in reporting out on the Association of Metropolitan School Districts meeting on last Friday, and the association invited Representative Jim Dabney and Senator Greg Clausen to come in, and they're sponsoring the Safe Schools Act, which is an anti-bullying statute. And I'll just read some of the notes. Emphasizes prevention of bullying, whole school climate, looks at school climate, looks at student bullying on students enrolled in that school only. They emphasize the fact that what they're looking at is the so-called Tinker standard of bullying. Tinker was a U.S. Supreme Court case of some note a few decades ago, which says bullying is defined as that behavior which substantially or materially affects educational environment. They emphasize that the state plan that they're proposing is both prevention and remediation, carrot and stick approach, and it's based on a theory, based on some study that harsh punishment of bullies actually in the schools puts kids on a path to being incarcerated in prison. Expand school prevention through climate and use the data to configure policies based on the school climate. Representative Greg Clausen is a former principal, and he discussed the fact that the task force surveyed bullying statutes throughout the United States. Apparently there are 43 states that have these, and in most states there are 9 components. In Minnesota there are 7, and I'll just quickly go through it. Bullying outside the school, cyberbullying, define the line. You know, you have to define where the line is. You have to post the policy throughout the entire school, not just one place. It has to be visible. Have a concise as possible definition of bullying. Increase the amount of time or length of any investigation into bullying from currently, For example, 3 days. Some statutes had it as little as 48 or 24 hours. They would also prescribe communication requirements through websites for parents, and that would mean translations on websites in certain languages. They haven't figured out exactly how many, depending on the population of the schools. And of course, there'll be different standards for special ed requirements. And finally, a component of training of school personnel and volunteers that would need to be trained on the proposed bullying policy before they would be allowed to participate in school activities. And that's my report. Superintendent Kelly.
Mr. Chair and members, I've been attending Rotary, but I wanted to just say that many Rotarians, including Director Mahan and Director Stunkel, have been out bell ringing with our Strive students for the Salvation Army this year. And it's been incredibly cold, so good for them, and for a good cause. It's part of their service project this year. The Aligning Technology to Career and College Readiness Pathway continues to do its work. And since the last school board meeting, the planning team, the design team, and the internal stakeholders team have all met at least once. And the focus has been twofold. One, to start to create an E12 pathway for career and college readiness. And two, to identify 21st century life skills that support the pathway. In addition, this last couple weeks, we had a site visit by Senator Al Franken's office. That occurred at their request. And a field staff person spent an afternoon in the district reviewing programs and discussing federal education policies. And it's my understanding that they're trying to visit all of the districts in their specific regions to see what's going on in education. K-12 administrators met to discuss the gifted and talented task force recommendations earlier this week, and the 6-12 administrators will meet later this week to discuss the same recommendations eventually, once those recommendations have been discussed and or modified, and have some, if they have financial tails, explored, they will be brought to the board for some discussion and possibly some action. I had a wonderful time at the Boosters Bingo at Sarna's a week ago Monday, and it was not only Booster Bingo, but it was they also had a baskets for auction to support the royalty, and so it was really fun. I didn't win a basket, but a lot of other people did, and I didn't win at bingo, but I had a lot of fun, so it was a great night. I want to thank the boosters and the people involved in the royalty for supporting the girls and the students. I had a meeting with Member Lee, thank you for your time, and then another meeting with Chair Bardell and Vice Chair Larkin, and I attended the school board subcommittee on policy, and I wanted to thank everybody for their time. And last but not least, at your places, you'll find a small token of affection from Dawn and I in recognition of the holiday season, so happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don.
Thanks, Tom. All right, next on our agenda, the board will be presented with information on the building's non-affiliated salaries increases. Lindsay Bennett and Bill Holmgren.
Chair Bardell, members of the school board, Superintendent Kathy Kelly. Tonight, it's included in your packet, we have a handful of building level affiliated
Benefit summaries.
yeah, anyway, we have a few employees, but it includes the deans and the urban liaisons that don't have their salaries updated. So is there any question on that? We're looking at doing the same as we did with the non-affiliated employees here at the district center, with the increase being the same as went to the teachers.
So same thing, just another group of employees.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments?
Are we looking to keep their contract the same?
They don't have contracts.
Okay.
So this is just like the district center, non-affiliated. They have benefit summaries, as you'd say in business, or they're, and so it's just merely a salary increase.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Dwayne Burkus will talk to us, present with information on the world's best workforce.
Chair Bardell, Superintendent Kelly, members of the board. We had an opportunity, actually, Chair Bardell and Superintendent Kelly, Director Holmgren, and myself to attend a meeting at AMSD on the world's best workforce, better known now as WBWF. So if I fall into that, that's what we mean. This is a new initiative that's coming out of our state legislature. So it's coming through MDE, but it is in statute. It came out last spring. So what do they mean? What are we talking about with world's best workforce? I'll try to explain what we heard. I don't think I'm an expert on this by any means yet. I think even MDE is trying to really figure out what all of this entails. But we wanted to pass on this information, I think the key points to you tonight. By World's Best Workforce, though, I think the MDE is really trying to put an end goal on a lot of different initiatives that they're talking about, starting with all the way down to that early childhood, school readiness. That pathway to success really begins at a very, very early age. But then they've also put into place that read well by third grade, and that is a key milestone, that benchmark, if students don't hit that benchmark, that we know things are rocky from there on. So really making sure across the state that we're clear on that. They're talking about is for all students. We know from other meetings that we've attended that our demographics are changing, not just in Columbia Heights, but across our state. That we have a district that is probably representative of what our state will look like in the lifetime of our children. And so it's changing, and especially with poverty, with fewer students from poverty going to college, and the number of students that need college in the future, that this is a huge challenge for us to close that achievement gap. So to do that, there's some very high goals. Already we're at a 90% goal across the state for graduating from high school. That is moving, it's on its way to 100% from MDE for all schools, for all high schools. And then, of course, that key piece that they keep talking about, that we will produce students who are college and career ready. And again, that is coming from our legislature, but also strongly supported by our Department of Education. So how are they going to measure this? One is through a national test, the NAEP, which is given and compares us then to international norms, and is just out recently on Minnesota. Minnesota looking fairly good compared to the rest of the country, but it is one measure that they'll use. Also looking at this, the achievement gap, are we reducing it? Are our students of color, our students of poverty increasing in their achievement as our other students do too? Are they closing that gap? The MCAs, and then of course, just the college and career readiness as we will see it reported probably in January and February. What percentage of our students are going on to college? What percentage of our students take remedial courses when they go to college? That's a measure, those are measures that we know are coming. So here's where we get into a little bit of the legislature's work, where they have said in statute that the school board is to develop a plan to support and improve teaching and learning that is aligned to the world's best workforce, and that this will include clearly defined student achievement goals and benchmarks, and a process to evaluate each student's progress toward meeting the state and local academic standards. So there is a role, the school board is named in this as a partner in this important work. So, but I think the key things that we heard from MDE was that this really needs to be locally developed. In other words, we need a community voice in our plan, and that we really do need a measure for not just how we did, but are we making progress from year to year? Are we getting better at meeting our goals? So, when we develop this plan with you, we are going to have to look at some key things. Most importantly, those evidence-based strategies for improving curriculum, instruction, and ultimately student achievement. And so making sure that we aren't just off on a whim, but that we are basing our work on evidence-based strategies. And that we then have to have a budget in order to implement and do that. Unfortunately, there is no additional dollars coming from the state or anyone else at this point in time for us to do this, but obviously there will be dollars involved. So, what would that plan look like then? And again, these are recommended components, and so this is where the state, the Department of Education is, I think, also trying to say, okay, here's some things we think would be important to have in there. And for example, those would include then the agreement for our teacher evaluation system, one that we thank you. We feel that we're well on our way to having that in place. A rubric that defines the effectiveness of instruction, so some way for us to measure, are we being effective in our instruction and what we actually see in our classrooms? What are the professional standards that we use to develop our system? In other words, what is our research base for this? What kinds of teacher collaboration do we see? Do we have professional learning communities? Do we have that peer coaching? Do we have a way for our students to get feedback, teachers to get feedback? What are the opportunities for evaluation, feedback, and instruction? In other words, from those summative evaluators, from our principals, how are we getting our evaluation back to the teachers, that feedback? And then what is our plan for continuous improvement? So all of those are components to the plan so when we talk about developing this plan, these are the kinds of things that would need to be in it. In addition to that, then we need an advisory committee, and that would be established by you, the school board, and that advisory committee then would ensure community participation. It would be representative of our community in its diversity. It would make recommendations to the school board about standards, student achievement goals, and measures. So really that committee, I believe, would be charged with doing the work of really making recommendations to you of what this plan would look like. Our thought is then that this most likely would replace the current Community Curriculum Advisory Committee, since this would be a very, since this would be a very similar kind of work. With that, then, there would be an annual report, and that report then would tell the public in an annual public meeting how we did. What were our goals? Did we meet them? And that with that, we would also be surveying our constituencies about our schools and their level of satisfaction with it. And that a summary of all of that, not the entire plan, but the summary would be submitted to the commissioner. So this also would replace a current publication. Our annual report on curriculum instruction now would be this annual report on our WBWF. The other thing, I guess, and I'll talk about this in just a moment, is that this would be presented to the community at the same time that we also present to them our integration and achievement plan. So really there's two big plans that are coming up for us. I'm talking about the world's best workforce, but there's also an integration plan that you approve on an annual basis, and I will talk about that, as I said, in just a moment. So the evaluation, the Commissioner's Office is going to evaluate that. They will help us, if we need that help then, to identify what strategies, what we should be doing in order to have a strong plan. But they will also be looking and finding those districts that aren't making sufficient progress, and they will, with them, then require that they use part of their general fund to help build a plan that would be more effective and that would, again, help them to create in that district the world's best workforce. So there is that component of evaluation accountability to our Department of Education with this. Its connection then to the integration plan. The integration plan, as we said, would be submitted at the same time. And the integration plan, which is about two things. One, that we do achieve exactly that, the integration, that our districts are not segregated by race or income, that there is integration, but that there also is a high achievement, that we are closing the achievement gap. Those are the two goals of the integration plan. Obviously, they're very closely connected, and we need to have them reflect each other. So the WBWF and the integration plan must be aligned. They must work together to achieve the goals of creating the world's best workforce. Like the WBWF, there needs to be an annual meeting. So that annual meeting they recommend is one, that we do them both at the same time. We do the WBWF and the integration meeting, public meeting at the same time, and we report to our constituents the results of our plan. Just like the WBWF, the Commissioner of Education would also be looking at our results, and if we are not making the degree of progress in closing the achievement gap in integrating our districts, then they also would be able to come in and help a district to do that, and that there's nothing here really that says what the dollar amount would be for that, but there would obviously be some cost in implementing some of the things that they would say. But that evaluation piece exists for integration as well as WBWF. So next steps, I think we're really at the very early stages of this, but it's going to be one of those things where we will kind of be, like most districts, I think, moving along as quickly as we can on the best advice that we can find. I think MDE, as I said, even is really working hard to make sure that they know what guidance to give us, what the spirit of the law is, and where they need to be very specific about what we need to do. So we'll continue to seek advice from them, but we will be working with Superintendent Kelly, the Office of Teaching and Learning specifically, to flesh out that process and timeline for how we could develop that WBWF plan, beginning very shortly, probably in the month of January then, to really be able to start building both the WBWF and the integration plan so that those would be ready and available for us to begin working on and also to be able to submit to MDE. The integration plan has to be submitted by mid-March. So we've got a fairly tight deadline in some regards to getting all this in place. I think just our bottom line here is we are talking a lot about college and career readiness. And I see WBWF and the integration and achievement both as really the guidance that we're getting from MD saying use those funds, use these plans to achieve that goal. So we're excited about the challenge and wanted to make sure you have this information tonight.
Questions, comments for Dwayne? Is there any, you mentioned March, is there any other deadline that you're?
Well, we're still working with MD on what exactly they want in terms of that. They would like us to get going on the WBWF plan in January. We may not have to actually have that public meeting until a little bit later.
Okay.
But we would like to try to have the public meeting along with our integration meeting if at all possible. So that would mean it would come up fairly quickly.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Laura.
Just a comment. It seems like a lot of the things that they're asking for in this report and evaluation plan, we already have a lot of these components that we're already working on. How much can we integrate with what we've already got going on? so that you don't have to switch directions on some of the stuff that we started implementing and want to start working through. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we should be able to do a lot, I think, with that. I think we are really working on this initiative, as Superintendent Kelly said, of, aligning our technology plan even to our college and career readiness. So our strategic plan obviously addresses many of these things. So I think it really is more about us saying, let's make sure all this aligns and works into this, rather than going out and saying, oh, we've got a lot of new things we got to go and start thinking about. I think we are, in a good position to be able to do the work that they're asking us to do with
And
this.
that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
good work.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I think a lot of the scorecards that we already have developed would fit well, would fit well with this plan. We just need to, we have another layer from on high that we need to adapt to. And so it seems like we were in a good position to do that.
Yeah, I think our work with the strategic plan and scorecards should be helpful for this, yes. Mhm.
All right. Thank you, Dwayne.
Okay, thank you.
Next this evening, Bill Holmgren, Director of Finance and Operations, will be presenting the board with information on the Valley View Facilities Project.
Chairman Bardell, members of the school board, Superintendent Kathy Kelly, good evening.
Good evening.
Give you a quick update on the construction over at Valley View Elementary. I need to talk to you about the financing. There was some misunderstanding, I think that's the best way to put it, with the type of bonds that we can use to do the new construction at Valley View Elementary School. We talked about using capital facility bonds, and that is not going to be an option for us. MDE, I got a letter back from MDE saying we aren't going to be able to use capital facility bonds. We have to either do a lease purchase like we did with Highland, or we can use some certificates of participation. Now, we've looked at both types of financing and what the cost would be. With the certificates of participation, very small, a little better interest rate with those, but because of the cost of actually going out and doing the bond sale, the lease purchase actually gives us a better cost over the term of actually borrowing that money. Also, our local bank is also very interested in working with us again and doing a lease purchase, just like they did with Highland. Now, the way we would pay for it would still be pay as we go through the general fund, just like we talked about with the capital facility bonds. So the way that we pay would be exactly the same, and the cost, as it turns out, will be the same. We compared the cost of the lease with a COP that was done just a couple months ago with a different school district. So I'm very comfortable going with the lease purchase. So at this point, I'm talking with the bank and making sure that everyone is interested to go that way, and it looks like everything should come together fine. And we will just do almost a mirror image of the lease purchase we did with Highland. And that's what I'll plan to go forward unless there's, big concerns with that type of financing for the project.
Any questions, comments?
Will that affect our levy at all?
No, won't affect the levy whatsoever. We will, it is a lease purchase, so it could be eligible for lease levy, but as you know, we're up against our cap of our lease levy, so we cannot go above that cap anyway. So that the payments would be coming out of the general fund, just like we talked about earlier.
So, Bill, it's essentially, I thought I heard you say the same funding mechanism as we did at Highland.
Yeah, it's identical, and it looks like and the bank will be identical at this point. Our local bank wants to be involved, and they've come with some very, very good rates.
Laura?
To lessen the paperwork, you just kind of copy it and
Yeah,
put
I think this
change the address and the date, and you're good to
as this
go.
project goes forward, it is a little bit easier because it is a mirror image of what we did. So we'll be bringing that to you later this early spring with a deal with the bank for the lease purchase.
So that's essentially financing through Northeast Bank.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we're still ultimately going to be paying for it with the capital facilities bonds, but we have to go that extra step and do the lease purchase?
No, we will not be selling any capital facility bonds.
Okay.
We'll be just doing the lease purchase and making those payments from the general fund
the general fund, okay.
as we plan to make I mean, if we would have sold capital facility bonds, we would have made that payment with the general fund. So the payment will come from the same place. Interest rate is practically identical. It'll come from Northeast Bank instead of a bond sale.
Okay, okay. Thanks.
All right. Next, we'll have Bill talk to us about construction management services at Valley View.
Okay, again, back to Valley View. We put an RFP out to get construction management services to go ahead and do that building. As you know, at Highland, we had used Kraus Anderson. We thought it was very important to go out and do an RFP to get the best pricing that we could possibly get. So I did get three RFPs back from 3 different companies that are interested in working for us. Of course, Kraus Anderson was interested. They supplied us with a quote. Bossart and ICS. All 3 of these companies have extensive experience working with school districts, whole buildings, additions, and so forth. Tom and I are still in the process of doing some reference checks with them, but they all have the experience needed to do it. We're doing something a little different, though. We're looking more of a best value principles and what does that particular vendor do the best, and what's the best value for us. So you can see that when we just got done interviewing each one of these vendors after we received their RFP, and right now we're looking at their on-site personnel. Who do we get, and what kind of quality do we have for the people who work on-site? What is the relationship with the architect, especially the architect we're working with? We're looking for cost containment. What do they do to help us make sure that we stay within the budget that we have put together? And adequate communication really means how well do they communicate with the different disciplines when we talk about general contractors, architect, and so forth. And then, are they familiar with best value principles? If we want to look at doing that how we select our actual contractors. Conflict resolution. And there's always seems to be some issues that come up, and not everybody agree, and we need someone to be able to really put that back together. And then a constant conversation, how much do we have to pay them? Where is the best price? And of course, experience doing these type of work. So this is what we're kind of grading them on, and hopefully by the end of the week, we'll have good information to make that decision, and we'll send that along with Superintendent Kathy's update over the weekend. Okay? So we're making progress. We're almost there. Any questions?
Questions, comments? All right.
Okay, very
Thank
good.
you, Bill.
Thank you.
All right. Move on to our action item portion of the agenda this evening. The board will be asked to approve a new course for the 2014-2015 school year, and we'll ask Dwayne to come back up.
Chair Bardell, Superintendent Kelly, members of the board, I was here in the last board meeting to describe some changes to our art course at the middle school, and specifically to its title, so that we can make sure that it is aligned and communicates accurately what we teach there to digital arts. So I'm just here tonight to request that that is approved.
Move that forward.
Second?
Motion by Missy, second by Ted. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Board, next on our agenda, Columbia Academy Spanish class field trip. The board will be asked to approve a Columbia Academy Spanish class field trip.
Yes, and also talked to you last week with Marie Nelson about this exciting opportunity for our Spanish students to attend Concordia Language Academy, an overnight field trip, so that they can get very excited about Spanish, learn more about its culture. So we're here again tonight to ask for your approval of that action item.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Ted, second by Laura. Discussion?
Guess I would just add it's important that they're planning on fundraising for the trip.
Yeah.
Yes, and they are fundraising. Thank you.
Good point.
Yeah, the students are going to have to do quite a bit of work to be able to do this, so this is a good goal for them to have.
And a good opportunity.
Definitely a good opportunity.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks,
you.
Zoe. Of certification of levy, the board will be asked to approve the certification of the levy. Bill Holmgren, Director of Finance and Operations.
Chair Bardell, members of the school board, Superintendent Kathy Kelly. We've talked about levy for the last few months and what our levy looks like. Yeah, we better get open here. Each year when it comes time to certify the levy, we actually have to do a short tax hearing. I see no one is here tonight, which is good news. Well, at least for me, it's good news. I guess actually it'd be nice if when we have good news to share with them that they actually would come so we could share it with them. But I will plan to go through as quickly as possible some of the details so we have it on the TV so anybody that's tuning in the next week or so can see all the information. But at our tax hearing, two things we have to do. We have to discuss the current year's budget, and then of course present the pay 2014 school levy. Now, to talk about budget, just quickly, I want to talk about what happened, what changes happened from the year before. You can see it in our revenues, and right now I'm just talking about our general fund and just our unassigned piece, really the piece that we have to work with that isn't earmarked towards something, but this is for our general education. We do have revenue of an increase from the year before of $1.2 million. Remember we talked about last spring, talking about sequestration and how we lost about $100,000 in grant funding through our title dollars and our federal special ed. But we did receive some increased compensatory dollars. I mean, that's completely tied to our free and reduced lunch count, and as that continues to increase, we're seeing some more compensatory dollars. Now, of course, staff development is back. For a few years when the state was in such bad financial shape, they allowed us to take the money that was set aside for staff development and use it for regular programming. So now that is back. And then, of course, we do have increased enrollment. So that's where the $1.2 million is coming from. And our unassigned, we do have a budget then of revenue of almost $38 million in our general fund. When we look at the expenditure side, we have an increase there too, but not quite as big, 1,163,000. And this is entirely due, almost 100% due to the staffing. Of course, remember we have the lease payment that we are paying as we go, that lease payment is in there. And then of course the staff development that we're spending now that we weren't doing a year before. So we're spending $37,765. So you can see there, when you look at the revenues and expenditures, we do have a little excess in our budget in the current year, at least in our unassigned area of $187,000. So this is great news for our budget and going forward. I just want to quickly look at our general fund kind of as a snapshot. Again, you'll see our revenues at 35.9, expenditures at 35.7. As you see that our projected fund balance or unassigned there at 4.8 million. Federal grants are about $2 million on a yearly basis coming in and going out. Our deferred maintenance, now here's some capital items that we have to spend on certain areas. We're bringing in 227, we're spending about 225 this current year. Operating capital at 633 and spending 631. So a little left over there, which is good because we, if you don't remember from last year when we just had the levy presented, that our capital fund is actually down quite a bit. So this will build it back up a little bit. Then health and safety, of course, this is ongoing. It's very normal to see a negative fund balance for our health and safety, but that gets levied the year after, and we get these funds back. So you can see that our projected fund balance is at 4.7 for the end this June 30th. And then just to take a snapshot of the rest of the funds, food service, we have a very healthy fund balance there of 305,000. We are spending a little more when we're bringing in there. We've done some of the serving lines, and we have a little extra expense here this year to do that. Community ed also down a little bit. We've made some adjustments in some of our fees, and I think when we bring the updated budget to you here in late January, you'll actually see this balanced. We're working very hard at taking care of that. And then debt service, you'll see that we actually have a higher expenditure there too than we bring in, but we have excess dollars in the fund balance, and state of Minnesota, you'll see that in a minute when we talk about our debt service and how we actually give money back to our taxpayers when we have excess. So that's why that's more than we're bringing in. Severance, that will be used up. We had some small funds set aside for severance. When we put together the OPEB trust a few years back, there was some excess there that we've been using up for our severance. So that will be used up this year, and we'll be back relying on the OPEB trust. And the student activities. We bring in about $200,000 on a yearly basis for our student activities. They fundraise, and money goes back out for their, their activities that they're in. So you can see that our budget and our revenue total overall is 45.5 million each side. We are spending a little more than we're bringing in, but that's debt service and food service down a little bit, but we talked about the reasons why. We certainly nothing to worry about in this situation. Now, I'm going to talk about levy. You should have received a tax statement. Looked relatively close to what's up here. This is just a sample, but really, when we talk about it, the only thing we're talking about tonight when it comes to levy is just the small piece in the middle on your tax statement. It just talks about schools. Okay, it's not all the different taxing authorities, just a school district. Again, enrollment is what drives our revenue for both our budget, and it also affects our levy. Again, our enrollment is up. This is great news. It generates revenue for us. You can see in fiscal 2014, we are up 1.5%. That's about double what we saw over the last few years, but we have saw some definite increases, and that's why we're talking about the addition on Highland and, of course, the addition over to Valley View. Lots of increased enrollment in our elementary schools. We talk about net tax capacity. That really talks about how much can our community actually pay in taxes. What can they support? You see that the overall value of our taxable property has been falling since 2007. And we're actually down again about 10% in 2012. This always lags behind about a year by the time we get the information to the counties. You'll actually, when it gets to next year, you actually will pay on the next year, but we don't have those final numbers yet. That's why you only see this through 2012. But it continues to fall. But one positive thing, I think, when you look at here, you look at the sales ratio, and what that is, they look at the value of your house and what the county has it assessed at and what you can actually sell it at. And when we see above 100%, that means your house is appraised higher than what you can sell it at. And what we're seeing now is people are starting to sell their houses for higher than the appraised value, and that's why you're seeing it 95%. So that's good news. People's houses values are we've kind of hit the bottom and they're starting to come up. The bad thing is, I guess I don't want to say it's bad, but the reason they use the sales ratio is, well, they say, well, if your house is worth more than what we would appraise at, that means you should be able to pay more tax. So that's what it amounts to. So they take the appraised value, divide it by the sales ratio, and we get a new net tax capacity here of 18.8 million. And you see, instead of a 10% decrease this last year, it's only about 5. So it doesn't make a big, on a personal home for someone, it's not a huge deal, but that's how they look at it. Okay. Now, let's talk about the levy amounts. All these levy amounts are what the state of Minnesota allows us to do, and we'll talk about the changes going forward. Now, equity revenue, actually, Ted talked about this a little earlier today during his report, but equity is really, when we look at districts who have very large operating levies that can go out and levy pretty much anytime they feel like it, they, up to $1,500 extra per student. There's lots of districts that can't get any, or ours is pretty small. So they call it equity, which means we can generate a few more dollars to help us out to try to get closer to the districts who can pretty much do what they want. So you can see there that we have a levy of $314,000, and that is down from the year before, mainly because we're getting more aid. Lots of these negative numbers we'll see is great news for our taxpayers, but don't worry that we're getting less revenue, because we're getting aid to replace that change from the state of Minnesota. Okay, and then now talk about location revenue quickly. This is what we had made the change a few months ago. We talked about location revenue. So you see that the location revenue now is $1 million. Our referendum has dropped from 3.1 to 1.3. And you say, well, wait a minute, we were supposed to be even here. And we're seeing about a $700,000 decrease. That's because that is made up with aid from the state of Minnesota. So we still are getting the same amount of dollars for our operating levy. It's just that we are paying a lot less tax to get it. So this is great news. The adjustment has to do with the changes in our enrollment as we've gone forward. We've made best guesses, then we've always got more revenue. More students at the end of the year. So that's why we're seeing adjustments on the positive side. But it is less than the year before, so that's why you're seeing it negative actually on the change. But there's a small adjustment there. Student achievement. Now this is a brand new levy. This hasn't been around for. It's the first year that it's here, but it's really the old education levy that was around. I'm saying about 15 years ago is when it kind of went away. So this is a new levy that the state of Minnesota put on. They expect us to put that on. If we decide not to do that, we actually don't get any levy. So we'd be losing, multiple millions of dollars. So this is something that we really can't do anything about. And it's going to be a tool for the legislature in the future to adjust laden levy. And they put it back in place. So it's a small amount when we look at our total budget or our total levy at $60,000. But that's what that's about. Abatement. What this is people who don't pay their taxes. We actually get it later. So in the past year, we were shorted about $185,000 from people who didn't pay their taxes. So the county turns around the next year, and we actually can levy to get it back. So that's what that's about. We move over to designated. Integration, you see a very large decrease in our integration. It was interesting how this kind of played out. They were very worried that, if you remember a year ago, when we look at our integration, about a third of it was levy and 2/3 was aid. And they wanted to make sure that we kept that levy portion. But when we all got said and done, they actually lowered it way down. We're only levying $20,000 now instead of $132,000. And we have quite a bit more aid, so that's great news. But again, it's good for our taxpayers. Our taxes are going down. Safe schools, this is the money that we use for our liaison officers and our security officers. And then a small amount of this actually goes to the District 916 for their buildings when you look at the intermediate. Career and technical, this runs about the same every year. It's based on a formula on how many students actually go to certain classes in our high school. But there again, that's actually a small increase, but it's about it runs between $50,000 and $55,000. And actually you'll see that a career tech, there's actually a negative adjustment, so that after you do that, it is only $50,000. Reemployment, that is different particular employees who get laid off from us. These are the payments that go back to them while they're on unemployment. So you can see overall, our total designated is down $138,000. Now we look at our operating capital piece, again, all designated dollars, but operating capital down $132,000. Again, we aren't seeing that much less in our capital. It's just less tax, more aid. Health and safety, this is entirely based on how much we've spent in the future and how much we're planning to spend, and there's a long formula that goes up and down. We're actually levying a lesser amount of only $378,000. When you see we had a negative adjustment last year, that negative adjustment is gone. So that's actually looks like an increase because we're not under levying. But overall, about $150,000 less in our health and safety program. Deferred maintenance, this is something the legislature put it back in place about 6-7 years ago for especially student districts, school districts who had aging buildings, which we do have. Again, a formula is how that comes about. We're seeing a small increase because we added on to a building and now we have a piece of building that's brand new. So you'll see how that adjusts. In the lease levy, we talked about that's for the gyms out front. It's for the ABE program down the street. It's for a piece that goes to ties, a piece that goes to 916. So the money kind of goes all over with our lease levy for different places that we educate our students. Again, too, for the through 916, the new ALC. That's the levies in there for too. If you remember, we talked about that. They needed some money to get that started, and we have a one-year increase. And that's why you're seeing an increase a big increase in that lease levy. A big piece of that is going for that, and that's only a 1 year. You'll see that come back off next year. Okay? Okay. I guess I'll just maybe ask you, any questions on any of that? Or can I get through the general fund? It'll go faster now, we're almost done. Okay, community education, again, our basic levy is down, that's because we're getting more aid. That's based on the last census, we get the same every year for 10 years in a row. So, a youth service, after school, you see the exact same amounts. Early childhood, again, that's a shift of $7,000 of more aid. Home visits, that's based on how many actual home visits we go on, but you see it's approximately the same as the year before. The only place we're seeing an increase in community education is our school age care, and what that is a larger number of special education students in our after-school program, costing us a little few more dollars. And this is a little bit of a catch-up. You'll see that there's a school age care adjustment there of $38,000. I don't expect this to change going into next year. We've kind of plateaued. And then when we look at debt service, again, this is where I was talking about how we under levy for extra money that's in the fund. First of all, you can see from 2013 and 2014, our main debt levy is down $349,000. A big piece of this, as you remember, a year ago, we resold our bonds, getting a much better interest rate, and this is a direct response to that. So a very large decrease, and this is a permanent decrease, is going down and staying down. And then our capital facility bonds that we do have for the middle school, you see them here. They came off in the general fund and they go back on here. So it's just a shift from one fund to the other. So that's why you're seeing that in the debt service, and then you'll see that till they're paid off here the next, I think we had that 15-year bond on that. And then our debt service excess. This is where every year we levy an extra 5% in our debt service, because not everybody pays their tax bill. But when we get to the end of the year, if we get extra, we give it back. And this is exactly what we're doing here. $158,000 is excess in our debt service fund that we don't need. The bonds that we paid, the values don't change, so this is going back to our taxpayers. So see overall, $335,000 decrease in our levy. We'll kind of put it together here. You can see we have an $875,000 decrease in our general fund levy. That's a 15.5% decrease. We're seeing that small increase in our community service. I mean, the 14.7% looks like a big number, but it's only 50,000. That's a lot smaller fund. And then our debt redemption, of course, is down $335,000. So you can see overall, we talked about a 14% decrease in our levy. It's actually ended up being 13.59%. So this is great news. I'll give you a look at what's happening with our levy. I like to look back and see what's happened. If you look way back, I suppose someday I should take this out because it's going to be more than 10 years, but you see a huge decrease. I always like to look at decreases when we talk about levy. This is back Jesse Ventura age. Back here we saw a huge decrease. Now we've seen it kind of inch up over the last years, especially through some hard times at the state, but now we see a nice decreasing. So if you look back, 5-6 years ago, we're not paying any more now than we did then. So that's great news. I want to just quickly touch on fiscal disparities, just because it affects our levy so much. This is a tax-based sharing. When you look at commercial property all over the 7 metro area, and what they do is areas who have a lot more commercial base than we do, they put it all together and they share it, so that we actually get money from other counties, other cities, because they have a very high commercial base. Last year, we received, for the school district, almost $2.3 million of fiscal disparities back against it. So when we were levying the $8 million, we actually only were levying about 6.5. And what's happening now is our levy's going down, and our pay 2014, we're actually getting more fiscal disparities of 2.6. So when you look at really what's happening to your taxes, you're actually seeing, when you look at your tax statement, you're probably seeing at least a 25% decrease in your levy, your school taxes for next year. And actually, I talked to some employees that work for us, and I said, make sure my numbers are right. What's happening? And I have one here that they actually had a 35% decrease in their levy. So that is great news for our taxpayers. So, any questions?
Questions? Yeah, Tom.
Is the Highland addition also part of the lease levy?
Yes, remember how we shifted it?
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I thought.
So yes, Highland is part of the lease levy now, but Valley View, that payment comes out of the general fund.
So that would also explain why it's up higher than over last year.
Yeah, but you'll see the biggest piece that changed it is the ALC, and that's a one-year hit. You'll see it come back down.
I just want to thank you for going through this in such detail. We try to be transparent, and the finance department has been shining in that area for a long time, so thank you for going line by line
Okay.
to be transparent.
Well, thank you. We certainly want you to understand, so again, questions, let me know, because
All right.
we want everybody to understand what we're doing. We really don't have a lot of control over levy. The state pretty much says you can do this, you can't do this, and we just pretty much bring what we can do on a yearly basis and try to explain what happened from year to year.
All right. Any further comments? Do I have a motion to move that forward?
I'll move that forward.
Second.
Motion by Missy, second by Laura. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Looks like you're up again for the police liaison contract.
Yeah, it's time to renew our contract with the city of Columbia Heights for our police liaison officers. I included the contract in your packet. The actual contract is word for word the same. We haven't changed a thing. The only thing that's different is an increase to the amount that we pay, and that amount that changed is 2%.
All right. Do I have a motion? So moved.
Second.
Motion by John, second by Laura. Any discussion? Yeah.
I'm just curious where the 2% came from.
Well, it came from the city. We didn't, I guess we didn't really negotiate. They sent over the new contract with what, and I don't know if that's tied to what they had done with their contracts with their police officers, but that's what they've asked for is 2%.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Comments? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bill. Next on our agenda is approval of school board organizational meeting procedures.
Chair Bardell, members, what we have before you tonight is something that was already presented at the school board work study session. These are the procedures to be used at the upcoming January organizational meeting. They really are not any different than what we used last year. It just states that we would be using to elect the school board chairperson based on Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised by Karen Keppel on November 29th, 2011, and that the procedures, all the other procedures, would follow the first Monday in January, prepared by the Minnesota School Boards Association. So I'm just merely asking for approval so that we can get ready for the January meeting.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move that forward.
Second.
Motion by Laura, second by John. Discussion.
Just point of clarification, for the other offices, do we use Robert's rules as well? It seems like we've done that in the past.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. All right. Any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Next on our agenda, second reading of board policies, 401, equal employment opportunity, 403, discipline, suspension, and dismissal of school district employees, 405, veterans preference in hiring, 406, public and private personal data, 407, employee right to know exposure to hazardous substances, 409, employee publications, instruction materials, inventions and creations, 414, mandated reporting of child neglect, physical or sexual abuse, 417, chemical use / abuse, 418, drug-free workplace / drug-free school, 419, tobacco-free environment, 422, policies incorporated by reference, 424, license status, 425, staff development. These policies appeared on the November 26th meeting for a first reading, and they've been posted for comment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ted, second by John. Any discussion?
I had a question on the veterans preference. Were the points assigned for various categories, is that to comply with the Minnesota Veterans Preference Act?
Yes.
Okay, so that was statutory.
Mhm.
All right. Has anybody made any comments? Like, I always want to ask that.
I haven't received any.
None to me.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Second reading? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Board topics. John?
Just a couple things that are coming up I just want people to be aware of. Columbia Academy is hosting their play. I believe it's, well, I don't believe, I know it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Alice in Wonderland Junior. It starts at 7. I think the way I understand the pricing is it's $3 for an adult, $2 for high school, middle school, and $1 for elementary. And then it was finished up with, if you can't afford it, come see it for free. So, or just donations if possible. So, looks to be a lot of fun. So if you get a chance, come on up. It's up here at the high school. And then the other thing I know that they've got going on here at the high school this week is the Reach Breakfast on Friday. And I would encourage people to come to that as well. I think that's 8 to
To 10.
10? Okay, thanks.
Great, thanks, John. Yeah, Laura?
Well, there's a couple of things also coming up over at the academy. There's the choir concert next Monday night, and then their band concert is on the Thursday as well. And we, sorry about that. We definitely have a very vibrant program in all of the arts as well, and be sure and get out there and see all the talent and all the hard work that they do with musicians of this district. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and I look forward to going to Ties next week. So that ought to be fun to bring back some of that stuff. So anybody, board members who are still interested.
Great.
I know that Dawn said she could twist some arms.
Our next meeting is in January, correct? So wishing everybody happy holidays would be appropriate to all of you.
Yes.
You? Same to you?
Yes, I'd like to put in a little plug for the all-night, senior all-night party committee. They're wrapping up their sale of calendars, the booster calendars where you can, it's $20 and you have 365 chances to win throughout the
And where
year.
do we pick those up if we want one?
You can get them from anybody on the committee.
Okay.
Amy Jo Ebert has them as well, so.
Okay.
And then they're selling groceries through the Schwann's, there's a Schwann's website, and proceeds from that would go to the committee as well.
All right.
Just so everybody knows, MSBA will be introducing their website. It's all will be updated in January, so it'll be much more user-friendly. We just got a preview of it, so, which is
Nice.
really nice.
Great. Good. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll say goodbye to 2013 as far as board meetings, and we'll adjourn the meeting at 8:23.